How many of you have one of these? How many of you have one of these? Everybody know what this is? It's a cell phone, right? Wrong. And it's a smartphone. And it's a smartphone because it's basically a computer. Now, how many of you in here know how to drive? Okay, majority of you. Okay, so if I give you an address that you've never been to before, you've never been to this address before, how do you get there? It's a good question, right? Now, if you're old like me, you sit there and go, well, you pull out a map and you figure out your route, you figure out where the address is and what roads get there. But most of you would never do that. Many of you have never seen a paper map, not one you use to drive somewhere. What most of you do is simply plug into this device that address of where you want to go. And when you plug it into this device, you then take this device with you in the car, and you get in with absolute confidence that you're going to end up at the address that you need to be, even though you've never been there before, even though you don't know how to get there. Why? Because this device knows how to get there. Now you think about it, you go, well, what are we talking about here? Well, one of the things we're talking about is this idea of integrated culture. That culture now, for many of us, is not just us. We don't get in the car and drive to a place we've never been to. Yet we are confident with this device connected to the internet and GPS satellite and maps through the internet, right, that it will take us where we need to go. Now, we don't sit and take this device and put it in the driver's seat and we sit in the passenger seat and go, okay, get me where I need to go. So this device without us can't get there. But we without this device can't get there either. And that's really the basis of integrated culture. The idea that we are now integrating with the device itself. Now understand, I'm not sitting here saying, oh, this is now, we're now one with the internet, and et cetera, et cetera. That's not what I'm talking about. But I do want to bring this up because a lot of you are looking at me kind of rolling your eyes and going, wait a minute, this is not a living organism. This is a piece of silicon. Well, my response to you is let's not be so carbon-centric in our belief, okay? We don't want to be silicon racist, okay? We don't want to sit here and say, are we being silicon racist? We are not. This device serves a purpose. Historically, it served a purpose with us as the end user. But today, that's changed. These devices connected to the internet now allow us to integrate with our thought processes. Not that they are our thought processes, but there is a commonality between what the internet does and the way our brain works. If you think about it, we have a brain that does what? It gathers information, it processes that information, it stores that information, and then it retrieves that information. Well, how does the internet work? It gathers information, it processes that information, it stores that information, and then it retrieves that information. And so what that gives us is a commonality. It gives us a common basis in which to now say we have integration points. In order to have an integrated culture, we have to have integration points. We have to have points where we can look at it and go, do these two things have commonality? Do they come together in a realistic way? And not a way that's forced, but a way that's natural. And the answer is yes. And so now we look at our brain and we go, okay, well, we as a brain can do an awful lot of things. We as an individual. Well, what do we do? What do we bring in? So we look at this whole network, this system that we're talking about. We take a look at it and we go, okay, what does this bring in? This is a really cool picture, isn't it? You know what this is? How many of you think this is actually your brain, the synaptic connectors in your brain? Okay? What this is the internet with the earth removed. That's what it is. So what you're seeing is this system, this internet that exists on our planet. It is a global phenomenon. But it does look very much like a brain. like the connectivity that goes in, the synaptic connectors within your brain. And so what we want to look at in terms of integrated culture is not, is the internet alive, or is the, are we having artificial intelligence? This is not what we're talking about. What we're talking about here today is really the idea that the internet combined with you, right? So there's me, and there's things that the place I want to go, and the fact that I can drive a car, and there's this device connected to the internet and GPS that allows me to enhance what I can do as an individual. The internet gives us the commonality. It's global. It gives us a global commonality. If you are connecting to the internet in the United States, if you're connecting to the internet in the Philippines, if you're doing it in China, if you're doing it in Russia, there is a common set of internet protocols that everyone are going to use. Your speeds may be different. You may be limited by, artificially limited by the government, but the connection to the internet is exactly the same. And that basis becomes the base for our idea of a global culture. There is commonality here. But that's not enough. What needs to be added to it is creativity, is innovation, is understanding. And those things come from us. So we, with the internet, become more than what we are individually. This idea of an integrated culture. There's more to it. So where are we in the system then? Right? So have we now become part of the system? Well, I mean, you could look at it and say, well, there you are. Right? There you are in our picture. So there you are in the system. And that makes you sit there and go, wait a minute, I'm not part of the internet. I am an individual. I can do these things on my own. You're absolutely right. But we are part of the system. Every day we use the various components of the system to do what we need to do. So we are part of the system. But more importantly, if you think about it, the system is part of us. That's a wireless pacemaker. This is from an article on how to hack a heart. Kind of scary, isn't it? But it's a wireless pacemaker. It brings the internet inside your body. We have a number of different applications that we all use, that we can all access, that we really don't give it a second thought. But it comes as part of us. It starts to extend who we are through the use of the internet into this global culture, into this integrated culture that we're talking about. And the issue that we're talking about today, with why we're all here, is to talk about not mechanically how does that work, but really to talk about what does it mean. What does it mean for us moving forward? How do we go in and look at the ethics, the morals, the path forward, the relationship that we've developed? I mean, think about it today. When I was growing up, the only thing I knew about China or India or the other side of the world was what I saw in movies. I mean, they weren't real people, they were movie people. But today, if you want to know what happened in Syria 15 minutes ago, you can find out. You can know exactly what happened. And you can care deeply about it because it's instantaneous to you. You know what is going on everywhere in the world. And we see that in our young people. We see a much more expanded consciousness, a much greater integration with your fellow people around the world, because you do have instantaneous access to what they do and who they are. Not actors portraying them, but the actual person themselves. And you get to see what's happening to them. So if there is a typhoon, you see the typhoon, and you actually see the houses getting washed away. Now, if the bomb explodes, we literally get to see, if not the explosion of the bomb, the immediate aftermath. And all of it is made available to us. And so as an integrated culture then, what is it that we're looking at? Well, here's a good question for you. Do you remember last year's Summer Olympics? This is Oscar Pistorius. Okay? Oscar wanted to run in the Olympics. Now, 5 years ago, if a double amputee came up and said, I want to run in the Olympics, the first thought you would have would be, well, that's what Special Olympics are for. Because clearly you're not able to run against able-bodied people. But that wasn't the discussion they had last year, was it? The discussion they had last year was, is Oscar allowed to run? Do his artificial limbs give him an unfair advantage over those individuals who still have their original limbs? It's a very interesting question. As we start to get into an integrated culture, these questions become more and more aware to us as individuals. Many of you are in school right now. When I was in college, doing a degree in mechanical engineering, we were not allowed to use calculators in the classroom. No lie. We had to do all of the calculations by hand, and if we had a really advanced professor, he'd let us use the slide rule. But those newfangled calculators were not allowed. Why? Because the professors felt that they gave the students who had them an unfair advantage over the students who didn't. Today, you wouldn't think twice about having a calculator in the classroom. In fact, most of you just use your phone, right? Because your phone can do all that stuff. And now the question today is, well, is it fair for you to use your phone because, well, that gives you access to the internet. So there you are taking an exam and you go, I don't know the answer. I'll ask Siri, right? I'll ask my phone. And my phone will tell me what the answer is, and then I'll write it down on a piece of paper. And this has become a real issue for us, because one of the things we deal with you as college students, as college professors, is we sit here and we go, are we teaching them how to find the answer using the computer? Or are we actually teaching them how to understand and determine what the answer is? And is there really a difference between those two things? Google recently announced Google Glasses. Right? So I'm going to get a pair, because then every time I go to take an exam, I don't have to use this anymore, right? I can just put on a pair of glasses and there's a heads-up display. Everything I look at is telling me what it is. So I'll just look at the question on the exam. It will tell me the answer. I will write down what it has in my heads-up display, and we're good. Once again, the idea of integrated culture. Not us and the internet. Right? Not us and a cyber world. But one world, one culture, integrated together with the things that we can do. So what's the path forward? Well, what we're really looking at is this idea of human beings adding the creativity, the knowledge, the understanding, the innovation to a base, or a baseline, if you will, created by the internet through shared IP. In this case, not intellectual property, well, some of that, but IP in terms of internet protocol. A baseline that allows commonality around the world, allows us to put this together, and on top of that, add humanity, add creativity, so that we have this integrated culture. And what does it mean for us? Well, very simply, it means that we'll get to the point where one day we may be sitting here coexisting with our silicon siblings. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Savoie, for speaking here. So, certainly a little bit intimidating thinking about those Terminator futures, but fortunately it sounds like we don't have that to worry about just yet. Skynet, baby.
No, I think we're okay right now.
All right, does anyone have a question for Dr. Savoie?
Silicon siblings?
What's that?
At the end of your talk, you mentioned one day you might be sitting with silicon siblings.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. If you think about it today, I have a friend of mine who has 2 artificial knees. Right? You saw the picture of Oscar, and he's got 2 artificial legs. We have today, and unfortunately with war and soldiers, and we now have incredible advances in medicine that allow soldiers who would have died in previous wars to survive. Many of these are double, triple, even quadruple amputees. 5 years ago, those people would have been assigned to a life where they can't function. Today, that is not the case. We have artificial limbs that look and act like real limbs. There's a lady in England, and I love this story. There's a lady in England who is a quadriplegic. She is paralyzed from the chest down. She just finished a 26-mile marathon. And the way she did it was she used an exoskeleton. Right? So basically there was a suit of armor. Right? Iron Man's coming out May 3rd. So she used a suit of armor, and they put her in this suit, and it supported her, and if she leaned forward, it would walk. And when she leaned back, it would stop. And so she used this. Now, it took her about 3.5 days, but she walked 26.3 miles, and she finished a marathon. When we talk about integrated culture, what we're talking about is the opportunities that are there. The beauty of this is that exoskeleton is also being used, and I'll give you a great example. My brother is an orthopedic surgeon, and we were talking about some of this stuff. And I asked him about, the amputees and various other things, and he said, Michael, it's really interesting. He goes, 5 years ago, the accepted protocol in the orthopedic surgery was if the limb was damaged, you removed it. Because then you would use an artificial limb to replace it. You wouldn't worry about issues. If the limb was useless, you got rid of it. He said, we have totally changed in medicine. We don't do that anymore. He said, now the protocol is if there is any way at all to save the limb, you save it. Even if it's completely useless, you still save it. Because now they simply attach an exoskeleton to it, and the person has full motion again. Once again, that integration of man and machine. But more than that, because it's not just a leg brace, it's a smart part of the person's body. It's connected to their nervous system. It becomes part of who they are. And the people who have had these devices installed said, when they first get it, it takes tremendous concentration to make it move. And literally in a matter of weeks, it works just like a normal limb. They never even think about it. So it's those type of things that we're talking about. In our silicon siblings, we're not talking about the robot and the man. We're talking about a combination of the two things, where you may have artificial knees, artificial hips, and many people do, right? Artificial hearts, artificial organs. And so those things of, one of the questions I was asked recently was, well, when does, if you get everything replaced, when do you stop being human and start being machine? And the answer is, you don't.